being a state legislator and a farmer, and I serve as a Farm Bureau board member and also served on the Farm Bureau Farm Bill Task Force, and seeing how the federal government continually manipulates the market for us as farmers. First of all, I think instead of the federal government getting involved in biodiesel credits, let the states handle that. They understand the needs in their states better than what the federal government does. We did that here in Indiana. We only had one ethanol plant, and with tax credits from the state and also because of the incentives from the federal government, there was a huge increase in an overproduction and overbuilding of ethanol plants. We have to do it carefully and incrementally. As far as farm subsidies, I believe as a farmer, let's incrementally move away from farm subsidies. Let's get into a stronger crop insurance program when there is a natural disaster or a crop disaster, then protect the farmer that way instead of manipulating the market, because all you do with subsidies is you manipulate the market and you have a permanently manipulated market.
We have another question from the audience. The question is, what is your take on term limits? And we start with Mr. Daniel.
Certainly, I'm for term limits. I think it's a great defense with the problem we find ourselves now, with politicians and a political machine and a party machine that's literally entrenched. You know, in 2008, for the first time in the history of approval ratings for Congress, they were in single digits. Yet over 97% of all incumbents were voted back in. I'm for term limits. I will serve no more than 2 terms. I'll be doubtful if I want to serve after that. 6 years, I think, if we do the right job, we're going to be wore out. Also, get rid of all the special perks. They should live the same way we live. Also, I believe that once you do serve, that there's no serving as a lobbyist or even for a lobby firm. I don't care if you're just an assistant. There's no working for the lobbyists and peddling our liberties and our freedoms.
When I was first elected to Congress, the first bill I pledged to honor term limits. The first bill I introduced was for term limits. I lived up to that pledge. In 1998, when I left the Senate, when a lot of people were urging me to run against Evan Bayh, I said, I'm one politician who's going to do what he pledged to do. And as much as I hated to see that race go the other way, I held my promise of term limits and served only 2 terms in the United States Senate and under the limit of terms in the House of Representatives. So I'm a strong believer in term limits because it gives you the freedom as a legislator to vote your conscience, to not vote to protect your career, to not vote to advance your career, not vote to please the part of the crowd at the moment or those that are funding you. It gives you a great liberty to say, I'm out of here anyway, let's just do the best thing for this country.
I oppose amending the Constitution for term limits and rather wish the American people to have the choice every time when they go to the polling place to choose who you want to represent you. It's been suggested that we need term limits of 2 terms. Hoosiers, we are experiencing a situation whereby a senator has limited himself to 2 terms. And he is accountable to whom as a result of the next election cycle? No one. And he is voting that way. When's the last time Senator Bayh was in Huntington to get your opinion because he knows he's not going to run anymore? So the question is, who is he serving now that he knows he cannot run for public office because he's term limited himself? The one thing that the framers of the Constitution did when they limited the length of term of a senator to 6 years and the length of the term of a member of the House of Representatives was to ultimately make them accountable to the people every time they wish to return for re-election. I think you deserve to make that choice.
I would support a reasonable time for term limits. One thing that you see in the states that are around us that do have term limits, such as Ohio, Michigan, and in other states, they have a problem because the representatives that are there are in and out, and then the lobbyists, the staff, the bureaucrats start running the institution. So I believe it has to be a reasonable amount of time so that way things can be done in an orderly fashion rather than having people that are not accountable running the ship. The other things that I think that we could do, because it would take a constitutional amendment to have term limits, is it is up to us as people. There is an end of a term, and I think what we need to do is level the playing field in campaigns. Rather than allowing these massive war chests being built up to protect incumbents over and over, what I call McCain-Feingold is actually the greatest incumbent protection act, rather than having competitive campaigns. I think we also need to take the benefits away that they are given to for long periods of time. So here in the state of Indiana, we eliminated a 4-to-1 pension.
Thank you.
I'm just a little bit confused. If I make a term limit pledge to me, if I tell you I'm going to serve 2 terms, that's all I'm going to serve. That's the way I guess I would understand a term limit pledge, that I'll serve the 2 terms and then that's it. So I'm just a little bit confused. A term limit pledge to me means I'm going to serve 2 terms either in the United States Senate, and that's not going to be coming back again to ask for you to vote for me again in another election. I want you to notice, and I applaud Marlon tonight that he's coming around, because initially he wasn't in favor of a term limit at all, and he's starting to see the light, which is a good thing. But I will tell you this, the system as is, ladies and gentlemen, let's realize that when senators are there year after year after year, and they do build a massive war chest, it disincentivizes people from getting involved. And we have to change that. And I am in favor of amending the Constitution. I've already committed, I'm only serving 2 terms.
Thank you.
I will introduce legislation.
We have a rebuttal from that. Don, my buddy. You know, I have said all along that we have to change the Constitution for us to have term limits. One of my greatest political heroes is George Washington. He was a farmer, he was a surveyor, he was a military man, and he understood himself. And I agree with what Don is saying. There's a time to call it quits. And President Washington knew after 8 years of serving as the President of the United States, it was time for him to go home. And I think we need more people like that who don't look at politics as a career, but as an opportunity to serve the public. And that's what I am bound to do, and I am determined to do, to serve the people of this great state for as long as, if I'm serving the people correctly and we don't have term limits, why vote those good guys out like Mike Pence or Jim DeMint? You know, because it's going to be difficult to get term limits, but there are other ways, by limiting the amount of political contributions, by taking those chairmanships away from them that give them so much power, like Charlie Rangel and those folks.
Thank you.
Age are being laid off or cut back. We have people worried about their future. We have people whose investments have dropped in half. People retired, don't know if they're going to have enough money to take care of them for the rest of their life. And instead of focusing on the economy, instead of talking about what it takes to get this nation back in business in terms of balancing the budget, line item veto, the whole range of things that we have to do, tough decisions, we're talking about a whole bunch of other stuff. So 1, 2, 3, we've got to go back and get this economy moving again and get Hoosiers back to work, get people back to work, get this country running again.
What is your first legislative action going to be if you're elected to the U.S. Senate?
In 2001, I voted for a tax cut package that phased in a larger per child tax credit from $500 per child to $1,000 per child, a increase, or I should say a reduction in the capital gains tax rate, reduction in dividend taxes, accelerated depreciation schedules. Those are all scheduled to be phased out because at that time Tom Daschle was the majority leader of the Senate, and we couldn't get the Senate to not sunset these tax cuts. Is that confusing to you? Because it was confusing to me at the time. But anyway, in 2011, those tax cuts go away. They are sunsetted. We will have the most massive increase in taxes that we have seen in this country in decades. We must make permanent the tax cuts that we put in place in 2001. And then we must get spending under control to stop all of that sucking noise into Washington, D.C., capital leaving the markets, investment that is not there.
Thank you.
Should be used to create jobs.